Proverbs 3 verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, never rely on what you think you know. Project Engineer Reviewer.
1. What department order speaks of the guidelines on the accreditation of the contractors and consultants project engineers to ensure that only qualified and competent project engineers will be assigned by the contractors and consultants in DPWH projects? A. DO01S 2019. B. DO21S 2019. C. DO10S 2019. D. DO11S 2019. C. DO10 Series 2019. Reference, DPWH Department Orders. 2. The procuring entity shall, upon a written request of the contractor which shall be submitted as a contract document, make an advance payment to the contractor in an amount not exceeding blank % of the total contract price? A 5%. B 10%. C 20%. D 15%. D. 15%. Reference, Implementing Rules and Regulation of Republic Act 9184 or IRR 9184. 3. The advance payment shall be repaid by the contractor by deducting 15% from his payments on A. Final billing. B. First progress billing. C. Periodic progress billing. D. Quarterly billing. C. Periodic progress billing. 4. How many times does the contractor may submit a statement of work accomplished or progress billing and corresponding request for progress payment for work accomplished? A. Once a month. B. Twice a month. C. Once a year. D. Twice a year. A. Once a month. 5. Progress payments are subject to retention of 10% referred to as the A. Retention charges. B. Retention money. C. Recoupment. D. Insurance. B. Retention money. 6. Retention shall be based on the total amount due to the contractor prior to any deduction and shall be retained from every progress payment until 50% of the value of works. If, after 50% completion, the work is satisfactorily done and on schedule, no additional retention shall be made, otherwise, the 10% retention shall be imposed. A. True. B. False. A. True. 7. This is issued by the procuring entity to cover any increase, decrease in quantities, including the introduction of new work items that are not included in the original contract. A. Variation orders. B. Supplementary letter. C. Job order. D. Work request. A. Variation orders. 8. May be issued by the implementing official to cover any increase, decrease in quantities of original work items in the contract. A. Job order. B. Extra work order. C. Change order. D. Work instruction. C. Change order. Keyword. Change order, is increase, decrease in quantities. 9. May be issued by the implementing official to cover the introduction of new work necessary for the completion, improvement or protection of the project which was not included as items of work in the original contract. A. Job order. B. Extra work order. C. Change order. D. Work instruction. B. Extra work order. Keyword. Extra work order is new works. 10. Variation order does not exceed blank % of the original contract price. Any cumulative positive variation order beyond this shall be subject of another contract. A 5%. B 10%. C 15%. D 20%. B 10%. Note. In exceptional cases, where it is urgently necessary to complete the original scope of work, the head of the procuring entity may authorize a positive variation order that will make the cumulative value of the positive variation orders go beyond 10% but not more than 20% of the original contract price, subject to the guidelines to be determined by the GPPB, provided, however, that appropriate sanctions shall be imposed on the designer, consultant or official responsible for the original detailed engineering design which failed to consider the variation order beyond 10%. 11. An amount equal to 1/10 of 1% of the cost of the unperformed portion of the works for every day of delay. A. Retention money. B. Liquidated damages. C. Security bond. D. Performance bond. B. Liquidated damages. 12. Total sum of liquidated damages shall not exceed blank % of the total contract price, in which event the procuring entity concerned may rescind the contract. A 15%. B 10%. C 20%. D 5%. B 10%. For info. Rescind the contract means the procuring entity automatically take over or award the same to a qualified contractor. 13. Is a written order issued to by DPWH Project Engineer to suspend the contract work wholly or partly for such period? A. Change order. B. Variation order. C. Work suspension order. D. Contract time extension. C. Work suspension order. The DPWH shall not issue a work suspension order if the interruption is due to unfavorable weather condition, rainy, weather disturbances or its effect, river swelling, storm surge, etc. Instead, a monthly time suspension report shall be issued. Reference, Department Order 42 Series of 2020 or DO 42S 2020. 14. Issued instead of work suspension order if suspension, unworkable days is due to unfavorable weather condition, rainy, weather disturbances or its effect, river swelling, storm surge, etc., or other conditions rendering the site unworkable occur intermittently. A. Change order. B. Monthly time suspension report. C. Work suspension order. D. Contract time extension. B. Monthly time suspension report. For info. Rainy, unworkable days including work activities for the day must be properly recorded and documented in the project logbook, project weather chart and geotagged pictures duly signed by the DPWH project inspector and project engineer. 15. The contractor shall have the right to suspend work operation on any or all projects activities along the critical path of activities due to the following. A. There exist right-of-way problems which prohibit the contractor from performing work in accordance with the approved construction schedule. B. Requisite construction plans which must be owner-furnished are not issued to the contractor precluding any work called for by such plans. C. Peace and order conditions make it extremely dangerous, if not possible, to work. However, this condition must be certified in writing by the Philippine National Police Station which has responsibility over the affected area and confirmed by the Department of Interior and Local Government Regional Director. D. There is failure on the part of the procuring entity to deliver government-furnished materials and equipment as stipulated in the contract. E. Delay in the payment of contractor's claim for progress billing beyond 45 calendar days from the time the contractor's claim has been certified to by the procuring entity's authorized representative that the documents are complete unless there are justifiable reasons thereof, which shall be communicated in writing to the contractor. A and B. B, C and D. C, E. D, all of the above. D, all of the above. Note: additional grounds for suspension of works are listed on DO 42/2020 of DPWH. 16. Is a written order issued by the DPWH Project Engineer to the contractor to resume construction operation covered by a previous work suspension order, after the cause of or reason for the work suspension has been resolved. A. Change order. B. Variation order. C. Suspension of work. D. Work resumption order. D. Work resumption order. 17. Is a written authority issued by DPWH Project Engineer granting the contractor additional time beyond the approved completion date in order to carry out remaining works or any additional works. A. Change order. B. Variation order. C. Suspension of work. D. Contract time extension. D. Contract time extension. 18. Who is the delegated authority for local project authorized to issue work suspension order, work resumption order, and contract time extension, including the determination of the inclusive period necessary with cumulative inclusive period up to 60 days? A. District Engineer. B. Regional Director. C. Cluster Director. D. Undersecretary. A. District Engineer. 19. Who is the delegated authority for local project authorized to issue work suspension order, work resumption order, and contract time extension, including the determination of the inclusive period necessary with cumulative inclusive period beyond 60 days? A. District Engineer. B. Regional Director. C. Cluster Director. D. Undersecretary. B. Regional Director. 20. Who is the delegated authority for Central UPMO project authorized to issue work suspension order, work resumption order, and contract time extension, including the determination of the inclusive period necessary with cumulative inclusive period up to 120 calendar days? A. District Engineer. B. Regional Director. C. UPMO Cluster Director, Bureau Director Undersecretary. D. Undersecretary for Technical Services, UPMO Operations. C. UPMO Cluster Director, Bureau Director Undersecretary. 21. Who is the delegated authority for Central UPMO project authorized to issue work suspension order, work resumption order, and contract time extension, including the determination of the inclusive period necessary with cumulative inclusive period beyond 120 calendar days? A. District Engineer. B. Regional Director. C. UPMO Cluster Director, Bureau Director Undersecretary. D. Undersecretary for Technical Services, UPMO Operations. D. Undersecretary for Technical Services, UPMO Operations. 22. This is prepared once the project reaches an accomplishment of 95% of the total contract amount in preparation for the final turnover of the project. A. Certificate of Completion. B. Punch List. C. Project Bonus. D. Certificate of Acceptance. B. Punch list. Note: punch list, however, shall not preclude the procuring entity's claim for liquidated damages. For info. Preclude means close. 23. The procuring entity shall terminate for default a contract for goods if supplier fails to deliver or perform at least how many % of the contract price within the period specified in the contract. A. 10%. B. 15%. C. 20%. D. 25%. A. 10%. 24. Procuring entity shall terminate for default a contracts for infrastructure projects when any of the following conditions attend its implementation due to the contractor's fault and while the project is ongoing, it has incurred negative slippage of how many % or more in accordance with Presidential Decree 1870. A. 10%. B. 15%. C. 20%. D. 25%. B. 15%. 25. Procuring entity shall terminate for default due to the contractor's fault and after the contract time has expired, it has incurred a negative slippage of blank % or more. A. 10%. B. 15%. C. 20%. D. 25%. A. 10%. 26. What is the minimum average compressive strength for a non-load-bearing concrete hollow blocks? A. 500 psi. B. 600 psi. C. 700 psi. D. 800 psi. B. 600 psi. Reference: DO80S 2018. Note: minimum strength for individual CHB is 500 psi. 27. How many pieces of concrete hollow blocks per square meter are used in the cost estimation? A. 12.5. B. 13. C. 12.5 plus 5% wastage. D. None of the above. B. 13. Reference: DO137S 2017 Cost Estimation Manual for Low-Rise Building. 28. What is the cement-sand ratio to achieve 500 pounds per square inch concrete hollow blocks? A. 1:2. B. 1:3. C. 1:5. D. 1:6. D. 1:6. Reference: Simplified Construction Handbook for School Buildings, DPWH, May 2014. 29. What is the mix ratio by volume of the mortar used in the installation of CHB and Louver blocks? A. 1 part cement, 1 part sand. B. 1 part cement, 2 part sand. C. 1 part cement, 3 part sand. D. 1 part cement, 4 part sand. C. 1 part cement, 3 part sand. 30. What is the minimum corrugation overlap on roofing sheet installation? A. 2. B. 2.5. C. 3. D. 3.5. B. 2.5. 31. What is the design standard width for tourism and farm-to-market road projects? A. Minimum of 6.1 meters for 2 lanes. B. Minimum of 4.6 meters for 2 lanes. C. Minimum of 5.6 meters for 2 lanes. D. Minimum of 6.7 meters for 2 lanes. A. Minimum of 6.1 meters for 2 lanes, reference, DO15S 2020. 32. How many project billboard are installed for each road/bridge/flood control project? A. 1. B. 2. C. 3. D. 4. B. 2, 1 at the beginning and 1 at the end of the project. Note, for road projects with length of 10 kilometers or more, additional billboards shall also be installed at every 5-kilometer interval. Reference, DO 21S 2017. 33. What is the dimension of a DPWH project billboard? A. 2 feet by 4 feet. B. 3 feet by 6 feet. C. 4 feet by 8 feet. D. 8 feet by 16 feet. C. 4 feet by 8 feet. 34. Is the total estimated cost of the project which covers the civil works cost, engineering supervision, and administrative overhead, road right-of-way acquisition cost, construction contingency. Include information about the project location and limits, quantity and unit cost for each item of work, construction duration, funding source, equipment requirements, etc. A. Approved budget for the contract. B. Detailed unit price analysis. C. Program of works. D. Commission. C. Program of works. 35. Is the total estimated agency estimate, direct cost, indirect cost and tax, for civil works contract of infrastructure projects, wherein it is the sealing of award of contract for government locally funded projects and reference for comparison of bid costs of contractors for both locally funded and foreign assisted projects. A. Approved budget for the contract. B. Detailed unit price analysis. C. Program of works. D. Commission. A. Approved budget for the contract. 36. Is the determination of reasonable unit cost of each item of work which reflects the breakdown showing the quantities of work items, unit prices of materials, equipment rental rates, labor rates and DPWH prescribed indirect costs including taxes. A. Approved budget for the contract. B. Detailed unit price analysis. C. Program of works. D. Commission. B. Detailed unit price analysis. 37. 1 story up to 5 stories in height, from 3.00 meters up to a maximum of 15.00 meters above established grade. A. Low-rise building. B. Mid-rise building. C. High-rise building. D. Bosta building. A. Low-rise building. 38. On the preparation of detailed unit price analysis, allowance for waste and/or losses shall not exceed blank % of the materials requirement. A. 10%. B. 8%. C. 7%. D. 5%. D. 5%. 39. How many % is shrinkage factor used for material cost estimation of embankment from common borrow by equipment? A. 10%. B. 15%. C. 20%. D. 25%. D. 25%. 40. How many % is shrinkage factor used for material cost estimation of gravel bedding? A. 5%. B. 10%. C. 15%. D. 20%. A. 5%. 41. What is the minimum cement content per cubic meter on a Class A concrete? A. 9. B. 9.1. C. 9.5. D. 8. B. 9.1. Reference, Item 405 Blue Book 2013 edition and DO 137S 2017. Class A is 20.7 megapascals. For all superstructures and heavily reinforced substructures. 42. What is the minimum cement content per cubic meter on a Class C concrete? A. 9. B. 9.1. C. 9.5. D. 8. C. 9.5. Reference, Item 405 Blue Book 2013 edition. Class C is 20.7 megapascals. For thin reinforced sections, railings, precast RC piles and cribbing and for filling of steel grid floors. 43. What is the minimum cement content per cubic meter on a lean concrete for manual mixing? A. 6. B. 7. C. 8. D. 9. A. 6. 44. What is the rate of application in Item 301 Bituminous Prime Coat? A. 1 to 2 liters per square meter. B. 0.2 to 0.7 liters per square meter. C. 0.5 to 1.5 liters per square meter. D. 0.3 to 0.7 liters per square meter. A. 1 to 2 liters per square meter. 45. What is the unit weight of a 10 mm diameter RSB? A. 0.628. B. 0.617. C. 0.820. D. 0.817. B. 0.617. Reference, Philippine National Standard 49-2020 or PNS 49-2020. 46. What is the nominal weight of 16 mm diameter x 6 meters length RSB? A. 9.468. B. 9.909. C. 9.280. D. 9.017. A. 9.468. 47. What is the minimum vertical clearance above roadway for railways, flyover and bridge along and crossing national highways? A. 4.88 meters. B. 5.03 meters. C. 5.33 meters. D. 5.50 meters. B. 5.03 meters. Reference, DO 53S 2016. 5.03 meters equals 4.88 vehicle clearance plus 0.15 allowance for future additional road surfacing. 48. What is the minimum vertical clearance above roadway for pedestrian footbridge crossing national highways? A. 4.88 meters. B. 5.03 meters. C. 5.33 meters. D. 5.50 meters. C. 5.33 meters. 5.33 meters equals 4.88 vehicle clearance plus 0.15 allowance for future additional road surfacing plus 0.3 allowance to reduce truck impact risk. 49. What is the minimum head room between the pedestrian walking surface and bottom of girder of structure, railway, flyover or bridge, above? A. 2.10 meters. B. 1.80 meters. C. 1.90 meters. D. 2.0 meters. D. 2.0 meters. 50. The authority to approve the termination of contract for the regional projects. A. Undersecretary for UPMO and/or Technical Services. B. The incumbent district engineer. C. The incumbent regional director. D. The incumbent regional engineer. C. The incumbent regional director. Reference, DO 90S 2020. 51. Welcome arc/overhead boundary marker shall be provided with minimum vertical clearance of blank. A 4.88 meters. B 5.03 meters. C 5.33 meters. D 5.50 meters. C 5.33 meters. Reference, DO 79S 2016. 52. For overhead utility and power lines crossing the roadway, vertical clearance shall not be less than blank from roadway surface. A 4.88 meters. B 5.03 meters. C 5.33 meters. D 5.50 meters. D 5.50 meters. 53. For overhead utility and power lines from surface of sidewalks, vertical clearance shall not be less than blank. A 4.88 meters. B 5.03 meters. C 5.33 meters. D 5.50 meters. A 4.88 meters. 54. Structure at the two ends of a bridge used for transferring the loads from the bridge superstructure to the foundation bed and giving lateral support to the embankment. A. Approach slab. B. Wing wall. C. Abutment. D. Pier. C. Abutment. Reference, DO 114S 2016. 55. For a multi-span bridges, high strain pile dynamic test shall be conducted on board pile foundation at what frequency? A. 1 at each abutment and 1 at every other pier. B. 1 at each abutment and 1 at each pier. C. 5% of the total number of board piles. D. 1 board pile representing each pile size. A. 1 at each abutment and 1 at every other pier. Reference, DO 37S 2016. 56. Pile integrity test, shall be conducted on at least blank % of the total number of board piles, at each abutment and pier of bridges, or at the entire foundation area of a building. A 25%. B 30%. C 40%. D 50%. D 50%. 57. How many % is the roadway cross slope for a Portland Cement Concrete Pavement? A. 0.5%. B 1.0%. C 1.5%. D 2.0%. C 1.5%. Reference, DO 112S 2019. 58. What is the minimum width of a road shoulder? A 0.8 meters. B 1.0 meters. C 1.5 meters. D 2.0 meters. C 1.5 meters. 59. What is the minimum material for a shoulder on roads? A. Embankment. B. Gravel surfacing. C. Subbase course. D. Base course. B. Gravel surfacing. 60. How many % is the shoulder cross slope for a gravel surfacing? A 3.0%. B 2.5%. C 2.0%, D 1.5%. A 3.0%. 61. Gutters, valleys, flashings hip and ridge rolls shall be fabricated from blank cold rolled plain galvanized iron sheets. A. Gauge 22. B. Gauge 24. C. Gauge 26. D. Gauge 28. B. Gauge 24. Reference, DO3S 2018. 62. Which of the following gauge number of galvanized iron sheets is the thickest? A. Gauge 22. B. Gauge 24. C. Gauge 26. D. Gauge 28. A. Gauge 22. Note, the higher gauge number, the lesser the thickness. Reminder, thickness indicated above are base metal thickness. Protective zinc and paint coating are not included. 63. What is the minimum end lapse of prepainted metal sheets for roofing application? A. 300 mm. B. 250 mm. C. 200 mm. D. 150 mm. D. 150 mm. 64. What is the minimum end lapse of prepainted metal sheets for walling application? A. 250 mm. B. 200 mm. C. 150 mm. D. 100 mm. D. 100 mm. 65. How thick is the spacer of concrete on a foundation works? A. 100 mm. B. 75 mm. C. 50 mm. D. 40 mm. B. 75 mm. Note, provide 75 mm spacer at 600 mm interval both ways. The minimum compressive strength of spacer should be 1000 psi. Reference, Simplified Construction Handbook, DPWH 2014. 66. What is the cement/sand ratio to achieve 1000 psi of concrete spacer? A. 1:2. B. 1:3. C. 1:4. D. 1:6. C. 1:4. 67. What is the duration on the removal of forms and shoring of suspended slab and beams? A. 3 days. B. 7 days. C. 14 days. D. 21 days. C. 14 days. 68. Maximum drop height of placing concrete mixture shall be blank. A. 1 meter. B. 1.5 meters. C. 2 meters. D. 3 meters. B. 1.5 meters. 69. What is the concrete proportion for footings, beams and columns? A. 1:3. B. 1:4. C. 2.5, 5. D. 1:36. B. 1:4. 70. What is the concrete proportion for floor, slabs and ramps? A. 1:3. B. 1:4. C. 2.5, 5. D. 1:36. C. 2.5, 5. 71. What is the minimum distance of a school building from a cliff? A. 20.0 meters. B. 10.0 meters. C. 8.0 meters. D. 6.0 meters. D. 6.0 meters. 72. What is the minimum distance of a school building from a power line tower? A. 20.0 meters. B. 10.0 meters. C. 8.0 meters. D. 6.0 meters. A. 20.0 meters. 73. What is the height distance between the center of the outlet and the flooring surface? A. 200 millimeters. B. 300 millimeters. C. 400 millimeters. D. 500 millimeters. B. 300 millimeters. 74. What is the height distance between the center of the switch and the flooring surface? A. 1.2 meters. B. 1.3 meters. C. 1.4 meters. D. 1.5 meters. C. 1.4 meters. 75. An administrative penalty disqualifying a person or an entity from participating in any government procurement for a given period. A. Suspension. B. Blacklisting. C. Liquidated damages. D. Termination. B. Blacklisting. Reference, DPWH Procurement Volume 1, June 16, 2016. 76. Is the allowance in height from the river waterline to crest of a revetment, dam, dike or a levee, or from the river waterline to the lowest part of the superstructure to avoid submergence during high water levels? A. Overflow. B. Freeboard. C. Spillgate. D. Spillway. B. Freeboard. Reference, DO114S 2016. 77. What is the minimum freeboard for a 2 to 6 meter gravity wall? A. 300 millimeters. B. 400 millimeters. C. 500 millimeters. D. 600 millimeters. D. 600 millimeters. Reference, DO100S 2020. 78. Soil or earth material which has been deposited by running water. A. Alluvial. B. Mud. C. Silt. D. Sludge. A. Alluvial. Reference, DO114S 2016. 79. A horizontal strip or shelf built into an embankment or cut, to break the continuity of an otherwise long slope. A. Berm. B. Bench. C. Trial strip. D. Landing. A. Berm. Reference, DO114S 2016. 80. A structure under a road, railway or embankment, whether of single or multiple barrel construction, generally with a width of less than 5 meters per opening measured between inside wall faces. A. Cutoff channel. B. Cutoff. C. Culvert. D. Drainage. C. Culvert. Reference, DO114S 2016. 81. An alternative method of procurement of goods from the previous winning bidder, whenever there is a need to replenish goods procured under a contract previously awarded through competitive bidding. A. Repeat order. B. Limited source bidding. C. Direct contracting or single source procurement. D. Negotiated procurement. A. Repeat order. Reference: DO 114S 2016 and IRR-RA 9184. 82. Particles that pass through a number 4 sieve, 4.75 mm, and retained on a number 200 sieve, 0.075 mm. A. Silt. B. Sand. C. Clay. D. Peat. B. Sand. Reference: DO 114S 2016. 83. A flood control structure to reduce the flow velocity near the bank by directing the flow away from the bank and in order to protect the riverbank from collapse. A. Spur dike. B. Dam. C. Revetment. D. Detour. A. Spur dike. Reference: DO 114S 2016. 84. The portion of the roadbed prepared as a foundation for the sub-base or surface course. A. Embankment. B. Subgrade. C. NGL. D. FGL. B. Subgrade. Reference: DO 114S 2016. 85. What is the longitudinal grade for roads? A. Minimum of 0.50% on cut and maximum of 12% on cut/fill section. B. Minimum of 1.00% on cut and maximum of 10% on cut/fill section. C. Minimum of 1.50% on cut and maximum of 12% on cut/fill section. D. Minimum of 2.00% on cut and maximum of 10% on cut/fill section. A. Minimum of 0.50% on cut and maximum of 12% on cut/fill section. Reference: DO 112S 2019. 86. What is the maximum permissible variation in actual weight of a steel bar from the theoretical weight? A. 6%. B. 7%. C. 8%. D. 9%. A. 6%. Reference: PNS 49, 2020. 87. What is the unit weight of steel? A. 7,900 kilograms per cubic meter. B. 7,800 kilograms per cubic meter. C. 7,850 kilograms per cubic meter. D. 8,000 kilograms per cubic meter. C. 7,850 kilograms per cubic meter. Reference: ASTM A36. 88. What is the rate of application of a curing compound on Portland Cement Concrete Pavement? A. 4 liters to not more than 10 square meter. B. 4 liters to not more than 15 square meter. C. 4 liters to not more than 13 square meter. D. 4 liters to not more than 14 square meter. D. 4 liters to not more than 14 square meter. Reference: Blue Book, item 311. 89. Removal of forms of PCCP shall not be less than blank. A. 4 hours. B. 24 hours. C. 12 hours. D. 14 hours. B. 24 hours. Reference: Blue Book, Item 311. 90. Concrete on area represented by cores will be considered adequate if the average strength of the cores is equal to at least 85%, and no single core is less than blank of the specimen strength. A. 85%. B. 75%. C. 70%. D. 50%. B. 75%. Reference: Blue Book, Item 311. 91. The criteria for foundation of a school building for the actual soil bearing capacity on natural ground is blank at depth of 1.5 meters. Less than this value is subject for a changed in foundation. A. 94 kPa. B. 95 kPa. C. 96 kPa. D. 97 kPa. C. 96 kPa. Reference: DO 177S 2015. 92. What is the minimum design thickness for asphalt overlay project? A. 20 mm. B. 25 mm. C. 40 mm. D. 50 mm. D. 50 mm. Reference: DO 39S 2009 and DO 22S 2011. 93. If design thickness of aggregate subbase is 200 mm, how many layers may the material be spread and compacted? A. 1 layer. B. 2 layers. C. 3 layers. D. 4 layers. A. 1 layer. Reference: DO 70S 2016. 94. Turnouts shall be placed outside the carriageway of national roads with a minimum length of blank. A. 50 meters. B. 60 meters. C. 80 meters. D. 100 meters. B. 60 meters. Note: turnouts is loading and unloading bays. Reference: DO 58S 2010. 95. On the preparation of approved budget for the contract, mobilization and demobilization in no case exceed 1% of the blank of the civil works items. A. Estimated direct cost. B. Estimated total cost. C. Estimated material cost. D. Estimated labor cost. A. Estimated direct cost. Reference: DO 12S 2011. 96. For pavement design purpose, the varying axle loads are converted to a common denominator which is in terms of A. 18,000 pounds, 80 kilonewtons, single axle load. B. 10,000 pounds, 44 kilonewtons, wheel load. C. 24,000 pounds, 107 kilonewtons, tandem axle load. D. 32,000 pounds, 142 kilonewtons, standard axle load. A. 18,000 pounds, 80 kilonewtons, single axle load. Reference: OSHTA Guide for Design of Pavement Structures 1993. 97. The minimum pavement width of carriageway for a national road shall be blank. A. 5 meters for 2 lanes. B. 5.8 meters for 2 lanes. C. 6.1 meters for 2 lanes. D 6.7 meters for 2 lanes. D 6.7 meters for 2 lanes. Reference, DO 22S 2011. 98. What is the prescribed concrete structure for a bridge with span of 13 to 20 meters? A. Flat slab bridge. B. Reinforced concrete deck girder bridge. C. Pre-stressed concrete girder bridge. D. Cable bridge. B. Reinforced concrete deck girder bridge. Reference, DO 30S 2011. 99. Depth of exploration for a highway project with light cut and fill where there is no special problem should extend to a maximum depth of blank. A 1 meter below bottom of subbase. B 1.5 meters below bottom of proposed subgrade. C 2 meters below bottom of subbase. D 2.5 meters below bottom of proposed subgrade. B 1.5 meters below bottom of proposed subgrade. Reference, Terms of Reference for Consultancy Services Highway and Bridge Detailed Engineering Design. 100. If the void ratio of soil is 1, the porosity is equal to A 20%, B 30%, C 40%, D 50%. D 50%. Formula, void ratio E equals volume of voids divided by volume of solid. Porosity N equals volume of voids divided by total volume times 100. Where total volume is volume of voids plus volume of solid. If you find this video helpful and informative, please like, subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified on next uploads. Thank you and God bless.